iOS, it's only sport. We're on tour at the Rugby World Cup, thanks to you, the platform family who sent us here. And this is a real treat today. We've been looking forward so much to talking to this bloke, Jim Hamilton. 63 tests for Scotland, played club rugby at the very highest levels. England, France, won 2 European Cups, did that for more than a decade. And now we consider Justin Marshall one of the best analysts of rugby anywhere. This guy next to me rates alongside him. So it's a real pleasure to have you on board, mate.
Wow, that's a lovely introduction, Marty. I'll take that. I will take that. The great Justin Marshall as well. So, no, it's class to be here. Obviously, in the middle of the World Cup. I say the middle, with the business end now, 2 weeks left. Phenomenal country is France, and it's been great to showcase our game in such an amazing light globally.
Right at the start of the tournament, these 4 teams in the semi-final, were you picking this?
No, I wasn't. I thought Ireland were going to go all the way to a final. I thought the host nations of France. But look, actually, if you unpick it and you actually look, without going into too much detail about the weekend's games just past now, you've got 2 teams into the semi-final that have won 6 World Cups, 3 each, in the All Blacks and South Africa, that just know how to do it at big tournaments. So if you went based on form, then you would have had Ireland, the world number 1, 6 Nations Grand Slam champions, a team that beat the All Blacks in a test series in New Zealand. You'd have the host nations in France with the world's best player in Anton Dupont, with how strong the top 14 has been. And we haven't got either of them 2 teams. We've got the All Blacks, we've got South Africa, we've got England, who are a team that have history in the World Cup, having won it in 2003, finalists in 2007 when they were poor in the lead-up and in the tournament, and finalists in 2019, a team that knows what to do in big tournaments. And the anomaly, but a team that I've got history against in Argentina, that were absolutely shocking game 1 against England, a 14-men England team that have squeezed and found form when it matters under Michael Cheika. So, no, I didn't think these would be the 4 teams. And that shows just the amazing tournament and spectacle that we're a part of here at the Rugby World Cup in France.
Knockout rugby, always different, isn't it? Obviously, I'm going to focus on the All Blacks. But just before we get to that, the quality of those 2 quarterfinals, it's easy to dismiss the other 2 quarterfinals because of what we saw at the Stade de France. But, Jim, I'm still, but every time I think about it, I'm still buzzing about the Ireland-New Zealand game. That was the best test rugby that I've ever been to. And then the next night, in that crowd and that atmosphere again. But just the level of those 2 matches, you talked about quality.
Yeah, I've got goosebumps when you talk about it there, because I was there for both them games in Paris. And I think, I'm happy to say it, and you referenced it there, I think we saw 2 of the best games we've ever seen in Paris, in the All Blacks and Ireland, and then the France and South Africa. And then we saw the other 2 games, which were quarterfinals as well, but they were nowhere near. And this is no disrespect to Fiji, England, Argentina, Wales. This is just facts, right? We know the game. We've been around a lot. I've played in games. I've played in tournaments. I've never seen 2 games like that. I was pitch side for both of them games. Wow. And the physicality, the energy, the level of skill, and I'm getting goosebumps talking about it now, is at a level that I have never seen. And if I had to pick one of the 2 games out of them, I would say, as a rugby purist, but also understanding the game and know what it feels like to be in them games, I'd say the Ireland versus the All Blacks is the best game of rugby that I've seen, because of the jeopardy on the game, because of the world number 1 versus one of the best teams in history in the All Blacks, and the way in which the All Blacks beat the world number 1, the physicality, the fact that the All Blacks didn't make one handling error in that game.
Crazy.
The fact that Ireland had no scrums in that game just shows you how good the All Blacks were. And I'm gutted for Ireland. I've got mates in the Irish team. I'm good mates with Mac Hansen on the wing, lovely bloke, know the coaching staff. One of my good mates is the main physio in that team. They've got some amazing athletes, some great human beings. But the way that the All Blacks beat them up physically was something quite phenomenal. And seeing Ardie Savea at the end, the roar, we've heard him roar in games, and when you hear him on the ref mics grunting and growling and all that, but the primal roar when that final whistle went after 37 phases, I was just in absolute awe and proud that I have played the game of rugby, and also very humbled and privileged to actually be there pitch side to watch them gladiators leave everything out on the field. That was a game where not one man, whether or not they started, whether or not they were on the bench, whether or not they were watching from the bench, having not been picked to play that game, they left not a millimetre of their soul out on that pitch. They gave absolutely everything, and it showcases our game in a way in which I don't think it's been seen. So I hope the world got to see that wherever you were watching it, and we were lucky to be there. But wowzers, and one team had to go home, and unfortunately, you know, the 4 points that split them two teams, it was the world number one in Ireland.
Did you honestly believe, after what you saw at Twickenham when the Springboks belted us, and then you saw the opening game against France, and we didn't look underdone, we just looked a little light, and we were getting beaten up by those two teams. Then we had 3 games. No disrespect to those opponents, but it's a bit like watching the Black Caps at the One Day World Cup at the moment, where we play Bangladesh and Netherlands and Afghanistan. We are expected to beat those teams. We were expected to monster Uruguay and also Italy and also Namibia. Did you think that the All Blacks had that in them? We tracked back, Jim, to Joburg last year when we were backs against the wall and we needed that performance again. And this is what we love as All Black fans. When we want our team to do that, when it matters most, they come.
I didn't expect it, no. I thought Ireland were going to win the game. And the reason I say that, I'm going based on, I watch all the Six Nations, I watch Top 14, I watch the URC, I watch the Premiership, I watch the Champions Cup. I know the teams inside out, Northern Hemisphere. I love watching the Southern Hemisphere, so I'll dabble in for the Super Rugby. Might have changed its name. Still Super Rugby, right? You still call
every
it
5 minutes they change its name.
Okay,
It drives us crazy.
I have it as Super Rugby, and obviously I watch the Championship as well. But I listen to a lot of the media stuff that's out there, the different podcasts, the little anecdotes. You read stuff online, social media, and it's the first time I've seen going into a World Cup since I can remember that there have been cracks in the All Blacks team. And when I say cracks, my opinion of that was the lack of power in the front five. Ian Foster's leaving at the end of the World Cup. Mm-hmm. When was the last time that has been kind of decided before?
And look, and that was messy at home, mate. That whole transition thing was very messy,
exactly.
Unsettling.
So messy, unsettling. This is a team, the All Blacks, where you've never kind of put them words in around the All Blacks. For me, going even further into it, Richie Mwanga at 10, has he really done it at the highest level? You know, how do you follow like Dan Carter? And then following greats of the game, the question marks around Sam Cane in the lead up to the game. He's obviously limped into the tournament through injuries, the pressure he's been under externally from the media, but I imagine internally as well. You know, did the players really believe that he is like a Richie McCaw, that he could take New Zealand all the way to win a final? Because these are the questions that are being asked that have never been asked before. Totally. How do you follow? Yeah. How do you follow Josh Cromford? How do you follow Richie McCaw, the iconic number 7 jersey? So that's why I thought Ireland, the best team in the world. There are no cracks. You know, Johnny Sexton, are his legs going at the age of 38? Well, we can only base on what we've seen, and no, they haven't. He's been instrumental into what they've done. But then you speak to different people, backs against the wall. You know, the game against South Africa at Twickenham, they'd only flown in 3 days before, the jet lag. Everything's building towards the World Cup. They know what they need to do. They know that even if they lose that opening game, that actually it's that quarter-final that it matters most, because you know, not being arrogant, if you're an All Black, it's obvious you're going to walk through Italy, Uruguay, Namibia. Like, you expected to do that, and they more than walked through. They
blitzed them.
They absolutely blitzed them, nearly 100 points in some of the games. So I was surprised. I'm not surprised that the All Blacks won. I'm surprised in how they did it. Yeah. Because every question that I just mentioned there that I had and that other people had, Sam Cane, best game I've seen him play. That's the best I've seen Sam Cane play. He was like a man possessed in that game. Richie Mwanga, that was phenomenal. Taking the ball to the line, the physicality, the shot on Bundyaki that he put in. This short kicking game that we've seen with the All Blacks as well, that they've kind of tried but isn't synonymous with an All Blacks team, where the space of Ireland was just in behind their line, just in the outside edges with the kicks up in the air. They nailed it. And I go back to it, they didn't make one handling error in open play.
Incredible.
They were absolutely phenomenal. Wasn't a fluke, wasn't, you know, Ireland could have, should have won that game. The All Blacks, they were absolutely incredible.
Give us your view now on Ian Foster, because Foz has copped it like a chook back home. He takes over the team. First year COVID. I mean, so yeah, that's just devastating. So then finally gets the team together. We start losing matches. We start losing records that, proud All Blacks for 100 years have stamped these in stone. We'd never lost to Argentina. Certainly never lose to them at home. We'd never lost to Ireland at home. We hadn't lost to Ireland until, of course, Chicago. A record defeat to South Africa. Never lost a pool match. All of these things. And the criticism is focused entirely towards that guy. He behaves with real dignity and class about it. Then along comes the rugby union who fly to South Africa and Joburg, the CEO with the sickle in his back pocket ready to chop his head off. Well, of course, we win that game. Then this year, when I talk about messy, the way that the rugby union have handled this whole Scott Robertson thing, and don't get me wrong, we all love Razor, mate. He's going to be a fantastic coach. But let the guy who's there breathe a little bit. I'm just fascinated to know what your thoughts are on him, how much credit he gets for that performance against Ireland. Because we worry, look, even if we win this World Cup, and God, we hope so as All Black fans, what's his legacy? People are still moaning about the guy, even though, the team did it against Ireland. He gets no credit whatsoever, this man.
Absolutely agree. So I'm a big Scott Robertson, big Razor fan as well. Love the charisma around him. Very different to Ian Foster, clearly, the way that he interacts with the media, the way that he handles himself, and I love that. I love charismatic people. I'm an Eddie Jones fan as well, especially being in the media.
With exactly. Of course we do, mate.
Of course we do. So you love people like that. What Ian Foster's done has just showed you the measure of the man, the humility in which he showed under the highest scrutiny. The All Blacks are still the biggest brand in rugby, whether people like that, whether Springbok fans like that or not, it's a fact, right? The enigma around the All Blacks around the world, they're the biggest brand, and he's the head of that, he's the front of that, and he's also been sacked from that at the end of the World Cup. It wasn't his idea to move. Like, he has been moved on. The pressure of Scott Robertson, of Razor coming in. One thing that I've been really impressed with Ian Foster is the loyalty that he's shown to his team and his players. Without doubt, they've been a team in transition after the World Cup. Lost semi-final, how well England played against them, and you have to look, like you said, with COVID that he's had, with the players coming in and out, sticking with Bowden Barrett at 15, sticking with Richie Mwanga, sticking with Rieko Ioane in the centre. This is just my opinion, right? These are just the big thing, like Sam Cane, sticking with his captain, sticking with his leader, you're my man, and also having the understanding. And I'll use the loyalty again to stick with the old guard, like Sam White, like understanding the need to keep these players. Yes, they might not be at the level that they were before in terms of physicality and speed and all these different things. There's a huge amount to be said for loyalty. And I'm not saying that the New Zealand Rugby Union haven't been loyal to him, but he's moving on. He's been told he's moving on at the end of the World Cup. That must be hard, right?
It must be unsettling.
Yeah, it must be unsettling.
Then you've got to regain your focus, and this is what he actually came public and he said, I just want, to be able to focus solely on this team, and this team to be able to focus solely on that. There's a lot of outside noise. He achieved it against Ireland, but there's still 2 more matches to go. Hopefully we beat Argentina in this one and then a World Cup final. Let's talk about those 2 matches then, and we'll start with the All Blacks against Argentina. And the obvious banana skin is after that match in Joburg, the very next match we played was against them in Christchurch, and that was probably the worst game under his tenure, where we just couldn't do anything right. We ran out of ideas, we were flat-footed and things. So even though the obvious feeling is, look, if this game was played 50 times, the All Blacks should win it 47, 48 times. But let's go right back to the beginning, which is World Cup knockout football, and a guy called Michael Cheika who's got a little bit of Eddie Jones about him too. So what do you see is where the All Blacks must be wary in this match?
They need to be wary of their mind. That's it. If they turn up, if you turn up, the All Blacks turn up mentally, which I know you will do, I think they blow Argentina, with all due respect, off the park. I don't think, and again, we can only go based on what we've seen this tournament. Yeah. So I might be sitting after this eating your microphone and being like, we've made the wrong decision. I don't think I will do. I think that the fact that Argentina have that win against the All Blacks sharpens the mind, and if they get to a level that I don't even think, and this is with all due respect to Argentina, I don't think they even need to be at the level that they were to beat Ireland. If they're just below that, I think they beat Argentina comfortably. And then it comes back to your thing, Ian Foster, win or lose a final, that you have had an unbelievable World Cup when you think about what they've gone through. I mean, Argentina naturally pose threats because they have the Latino spirit and the flair and the emotion leading up. And I put this to a mate. When you look at teams and you look at Argentina have gone by, and I've got history against Argentina. They knocked me out of the 2007 World Cup in France in the quarter-final.
I was going to bring that up, but thankfully you did.
Yeah, I do. I mean, the greats that they had, they had Roncero, they had Ledesma, they had Juan Martín Hernández, they had Lobe, Leguizamon, they had Contepomi. They had names of players rolling off the tongue, and they don't quite have that now. They have a team of individual brilliance. Emiliano Buffelli, great kicker, plays at Edinburgh. I know him. Huge fan of Marcus Kremer, discipline's poor. It looks like Matera is going to be injured, their captain, whether or not he makes through. Julian Montoya playing at Leicester. Actually, maybe they have got a few that we know of. Carreras as well, Santiago, Mateus. So I just don't think, from what I saw at the weekend, and it will be the same on the other side of the pool, unfortunately, I think there's a divide between these teams now. So I think if the All Blacks have the state of mind and confidence, and you'll know this better than anyone, and the people listen to this in New Zealand, a confident All Blacks is a dangerous All Blacks team. And because they've been there, having lost to Argentina, and what we saw at the weekend, the confidence they now have in their captain, in their 10, which are pivotal positions going into the knockout stages, well, it shows you. And one of the phrases that I've been using this week with a few mates when I've been doing my podcast is, desperate men are dangerous men, and they're powerful men. And the All Blacks were desperate against Ireland, and that's why they were so dangerous. And you look forward to the Argentina. As we know, it's almost ridiculous that we're talking about this, and this is no disrespect to Argentina. Last week against Ireland was a semi-final. That was a semi-final level game. It was a final test match. Both teams, both the Springboks and the All Blacks, are now going to need to get to a level in a semi-final, mentally and emotionally, to beat England and to beat Argentina respectively, which is, we kind of think, as experts, is probably what's going to happen.
We're with Jim Hamilton, 63 tests for Scotland. Played his first international rugby for them at under 19 and under 21 level. Played his first international rugby for the Red Rose.
Yeah, that was right. Yeah, I didn't really know who I was back then. I was a young whippersnapper. Look, as in my story goes, people listen to this, but he's got an English accent. My dad was a military man, so grew up in Scotland. My dad was in the Queensland Highlanders. We travelled the world. He was in the Gulf War in '91. He was in Northern Ireland, served over there as well. So I'm an army rogue hybrid human, and I got the opportunity to represent Scotland at an early age, and with a name like Jim Hamilton,
yes,
I'm sure there's a few streets in Dunedin and Invercargill. I know they have. I've been to both places. In Invercargill, there's some streets named Hamilton, but there's a Scottish heart beating inside of me. So the best thing that I ever did, playing, choosing to play for Scotland.
The second semi-final then, and again, when you look at it on the surface, people, you got an England side that is the only unbeaten team in the tournament. Tick that box for a start, because that's a hell of a stat. But they've looked mostly dreadful. They've looked mostly pedestrian. They did during the Six Nations. Look, I liked them against Argentina in that opening match, because down to 14, to get that pragmatic, to kick those points and put scoreboard pressure on. Against Fiji, they had a lead that they should have shut the door on. It goes back to 24-all. Yes, they go up the other end. But now they're playing a South African side that raised their game to play against France. The caveat I put on South Africa is the fact that they've played Ireland in a massive match. They had a physical hit out against Tonga. The Scotland game wasn't easy. Then they play France. This is the fifth one now. So to win this World Cup, they're going to have to play 6 huge matches. So this is also a repeat of 2019, and there's a few boys in white who carry big scars from that. And this is what I want from your perspective. You've been there, you've played in these games. I look at all of this and I think I know what I'm talking about, but I hope that kind of emotion, you draw on the worst things that happen. As a sports fan, my teams, if they win, I still sulk about the 1976 FA Cup final when Southampton beat Man United and Bobby Stokes was bloody offside. I still sulk about 1991 when David Campese flicked it over his head. It's the losses. Is that what motivates? Do you go back to those places? And that's what I mean. Can England find that, and that helps them in this game?
Well, the thing is, playing against South Africa, And this is the story and the narrative around South Africa. It's more than rugby. So when you're playing against a team where a game means more than rugby, that's a hard beast to compete with, isn't it? And it's actually the beast that told me that. So the irony is, in that statement there, is that has come from Tendai, the beast, 2019 World Cup winner. And you know that about South Africa. People know about their story. People know about their history. You mentioned the lead-up that they've had, the enormity of the games and the physicality of their games. I think there is something in that. I do. I think there is something in being that physical week on week and the mental toll that will take, and the way that England have managed to get into this semi-final having not really fired a shot.
That's right.
You mentioned that Argentina game. They went down to 14 men. Tom Curry was then banned for a high tackle. You know, they've had their captain banned in Owen Farrell. They've had Billy Vunipola banned. They've not known who is the starting 10. Is it Owen Farrell as captain? Is it George Ford and Owen Farrell at 12? Is it Freddie Stewart at 15? Or it's now Marcus Smith. There's so many question marks in this England team. So many question marks, you know. Yes, they've played well in games, but they've been absolutely dreadful in parts as well.
To watch, they have, yeah.
And to watch, and the fact that Owen Farrell's getting booed by his own fans in the stadium, and England are getting booed when they kick the ball. I was at the England-Japan game, and the boos around the stadium, the atmosphere, the energy was completely sapped. But what is the game about? It's about winning. And you said they're the only unbeaten team in the tournament. They're the only Six Nations team. They're the only Northern Hemisphere team now into the semi-finals. And there's something to be said for that. They are a team, I mentioned in 03, that won it. In 07, limped to a final. In 2019, got to a final against South Africa. They're a team that have got big players in their team that I haven't seen perform in a while. Maro Itoje was better at the weekend. Owen Farrell was probably England's best player at the weekend. We know that he can get to them levels. We've seen snippets from Manu Tuolangi, but there's just so many question marks. But we saw an England team play Ireland in the Six Nations. Ireland were on for the Grand Slam. Freddie Stewart ends up getting sent off, and with 14 men, England gave Ireland a fright. Right. So you know that this team have a big game in them.
Yeah, that's it.
They showed 4 years ago against New Zealand. Not only did they beat them, they absolutely
beat us up in that game. No question.
It was. I mean, it was one of the best performances of any World Cup in history. I look at this South Africa team. I look at the blueprint that they have. South Africans are built different. The physicality, the size. You know, Ebenezer for me is the player of the tournament so far. The way that he played at the weekend, the fact that Manny Lebok now managed to get them difficult conversions on the outside, their short kicking game in the wider channels as well, which was the difference. The game against France, how they're coached under the genius of Rassie Erasmus. They're, again, like the All Blacks, 3 World Cups. They know what they're doing in these big games. The big thing will be for them is their minds. They need to get their minds, and they will. They've been there, they've done it before. But I go back to the point. If England come with the desperation of desperate men, they've got a big game in them. We haven't seen it yet, right, but they've got a big game in them.
A couple more general questions, we'll let you go, and thank you so much for your time. I could sit here all day, and Lachlan's looking at it. We could sit here all day talking this. The refereeing. Now, so much focus before the tournament, and especially about the cards. And look, there was one Wales-Argentina that could have been a red card. There was one South Africa and France, could have been a red card. Do you feel that World Rugby has actually stepped in here and said, this is the pinnacle here, the whole world is watching, you've got to be careful now and tread careful. We don't want 14. We don't want to see... I know that, and look, and you know, Warburton got, you know, deservedly sent off in the semi-final back in 2011 against France, but you can just feel, even when you talk about it, you can feel that as soon as that happens. Do you, two parts to this question. Do you think that my conspiracy theory is right, that maybe World Rugby have stepped in here and said, just ref sensibly, like Ben O'Keefe did when Faf de Klerk threw it against a French player, and he said, I know what you're doing here, I know what you're doing here. And also just overall letting that game flow and letting the referees take control from here on in.
Yes, I don't know whether it's a conspiracy or whether that conversation's been had, but there's been an obvious shift. I think we can say that. I'm in the middle of this, by the way. The players, with my role as well, working with World Rugby, the fact that I'm in the media. So I have to sometimes tread carefully when I talk about referees. They've got the hardest job in the game, right? Because not only do they have the whole stadium on top of them, they've got everyone on TV, and then they've got the dreaded social media, which backs up, right or wrong, other people's decisions. Anyone can be on the sofa tweeting that it should have been this, it should have been that. Anyone can do that. I love the shift. I love the shift in which we've seen. You know, I was a physical player, at times dirty, because that's the way that the game was played back then. I think if you go into a game and you punch, you headbutt, you grab, you gouge another player, it's a red card.
It has to be.
It has to be a red card.
Right, so that's what the red card's for.
That's what the red card's for. What we are seeing now is an understanding that the game is being played with such physicality, such speed, velocity, that there are going to be incidences that happen, right? So the bunker system for me has been a great addition, because it takes off the energy out of the stadium, it takes it externally, to go from a yellow card, and then it can be reviewed. And I don't think we've seen one red card
not yet.
in the tournament. No. And yes, there's been a couple that have been close, but on the biggest stage, they are going to be the make or breaks, aren't they? And we've seen that before. You mentioned Sam Warburton's an obvious one to go to in the semi-final when Wales played against France. And I don't know, if you ask the Welsh, it was a ridiculous decision. It was a tip-tack. It was very different to what we're talking about now, because a lot of these yellow cards are all coming off contacts, right?
So head contact, they are.
Head contacts, generally in the tackle, and we've seen a few around the breakdown as well, to mention the Argentina-Wales one. I like the fact that they're going down that route. The player safety thing is a different conversation, because the player safety thing comes on around how the players are looked after if there's been contact with the head, both on the pitch, taken off the pitch, and then how they're subsequently dealt with after the game. So the player safety element is being dealt with better than it's ever been dealt with before. The on-field scenario, I do enjoy the fact that there is an understanding now that the jeopardy in these games is that high that you can't just brandish a red card and be like, okay, Evan Etzebeth, there's been a change of direction with Weenie Antonio, they collide heads. You know, the yellow card, when people are looking at as fans, yes, okay. I think everyone generally will be happy with a yellow card in that scenario.
God, I hope so, you know.
Because we don't want to be at a point in a semi-final or a final where there's a 50-50 call and it's a red card and becomes a real issue. But the player safety part is a huge part to it. So the referees have an incredibly tough job. The game is so complex. It's so fast. There's so many contacts, so many rucks.
So many rules.
Exactly. So they are doing a wonderful job. They really are. They're not always going to make the right decision, but I think the way that they and World Rugby have managed the yellow, the red cards, the bunker system has been a big shift. I wouldn't say a monumental shift. It's been a big shift, but I say it's completely positive, because you look at the games now, no one's really talking that should have been a red card, that should have been a red card.
Or about the referees too much, are they? I know Dupont did about Ben O'Keefe. All right,
he had a point just on that, just with Dupont. I feel he had a point, not necessarily on the decisions, but I have an issue that Ben O'Keefe doesn't speak French. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair to the French team that there's no native tongue, the cultural differences in language and tone.
And interpretation of that
as well.
All right, two quick questions, Sam. I know I said two quick questions before, but here we go. 20 teams, they want to increase to 24. Now, there's a double-edged sword for me here. You get Portugal, extraordinary. The scenes when they came back, they got a visit to the palace and everything like that. At the same time, you get Italy, a Six Nations side, getting belted by 96, getting belted by 70. You get Namibia getting towed as well. We know that the Tier 2 nations are not getting enough Tier 1 competition. To me, commercially, it's too easy to go, okay, let's rock it to 24 teams and we bring in all that extra revenue and everything else. To do that, you've got to actually make the proper, practical, physical changes and give these teams the breaks they need, the resources they need. Even in South America, they're saying, hey, look, we don't necessarily need to play the All Blacks if we're Uruguay, but we need to play all the teams around us. So where do you sit with this? I'm at the moment anti it, going, I don't see 24 teams working, but I do see 24 teams working if they do put all these pieces on a chessboard.
Well, I mean, let's put the world of rugby to rights now, shall we? But we had Thomas Appleton, the skipper from Portugal, who has been doing the rounds on social media. Cristiano Ronaldo paid them a visit, and what Portugal have managed to create around their country, beautiful country, which is largely football, but the energy around the fans. We had Simon Rao-Louis on the podcast as well, talking about Fiji, and Fiji have won the hearts and minds of many of the rugby public. You know, this is a very topical thing right now, and I'm kind of split on this. One is we are a professional sport, right, being played at the highest level. I understand that rugby is very inclusive and it's all, you know, we need to raise every single team and give everyone the opportunity and the funding. But the vulgarities and the devil inside me says, well, if you're not the best, you're not the best.
It's a World Cup, isn't it?
It's a World Cup.
Yeah.
We want to see the very best. It's not necessarily about, oh, we want, you know, so-and-so needs more games and they need more visibility, more opportunity and more money. That's the devil inside of me. Practically, when I think about it, the game, and it's great talking to you about this and maybe the people listening down in New Zealand, there needs to be a monumental shift in how rugby is structured across the world. There needs to be a globalisation of the calendar first. I think that the world of rugby needs to be aligned. So, one, it's easy to consume as a fan. It's easy then to commercialise. I have no idea about the commercialisation, but the TV, so you can understand, right, when the Six Nations is happening, the Championship's happening. When the Six Nations is happening, the B6 Nations is happening with the likes of Portugal, the likes of Belgium, the likes of Georgia and Spain and Romania.
Yeah.
And therefore, there's jeopardy in that tournament. The same is happening in the Southern Hemisphere. When the Championship's happening with Argentina, with Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, also there's a Fiji, there's a Samoa, there's a Japan, there's a Uruguay potentially in there.
There's a Tonga in there as well.
There's a Tonga, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, your Tongas and Samoas are just absolutely phenomenal.
Well, to me, they provide the edge that the sport is, Jim. I mean, the Polynesian influence is in every single team in the world, right? And
they're the best players in the world.
And this is and so the pride that those little nations have, but when you go there, they don't have anything. I went to Fiji on holiday in May. They were kicking a can. I went and bought a rugby ball out of the shop for these kids. They were kicking a can around, you know. So there's a massive leap to get them to that level. But you're exactly right. If these things, keep going.
No, but with that, absolutely. So if you can globalise the season and you can put it into sections like that where everyone knows at any given time this is what's happening, and then you build jeopardy into that. So if you finish bottom of the Six Nations, like Italy have done for the last few years, then that is where, if you're a Portugal or if you're a Georgia and you finish top of the Tier 2, however you want to call it, I hate saying Tier 2, or the B, however you look at it, but it effectively is a Tier 2 competition, then you then get promoted, you get that visibility, you get the money. Same in, Premiership football, for example, that's a great analogy. You come up, there's a financial incentive for that, and the same happens in the Championship. So however that looks, if it is, there's a South America influence into that. I know there's an APAC tournament going on with when Simon Rao-Louis was talking about it with the American teams and the Pacific nations as well. But but I think it needs to start off with a globalisation, so you know exactly what's happening. So Six Nations Championship is happening at the same time, alongside the Tier 2 competitions. If you just excuse me on using that phrase, I know some people are frustrated. You go into a club competition, and then there's an international summer series window where you can then cross over. A Tonga can come over and play against England, get that visibility. The TV deal's a bumper deal. The stadiums are sold out. The enormity of these games is publicised and there and clear to see. Then you go back into a club competition, and then there's maybe a club championship at the end where your Crusaders can come over and play against the Saracens, for example. So I just think we've got a lot of work to do, but I think one thing the World Cup has shown us is just how great our game is, but also how much the gap has now closed. You know, you think about what Portugal did, just to name one team, during the tournament, how well Uruguay played against France as well, but Portugal, because they beat Fiji, they drew against Georgia, should have won that game. They gave Australia a hard time. They gave Wales a hard time. So now what for them? Chatting to their captain, he's a dentist. He's gone back to his job.
Right, okay.
You know? He's working.
And how many of the Tier 1 nations are doing that except none?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So trying to get the balance of that in Fiji, you've got multi-millionaire players playing in a team which has zero resources. But this is what I mean. This is this is us being nice, as in and friendly, and we want to make the game global. We want everyone to benefit. Unfortunately, sport and entertainment doesn't work like that, does it?
It's professional business, mate.
Professional, and it's a survival of the
and
richest.
It's a business,
and fortunately, but I just think that if we make that monumental shift in globalising the season, I think these conversations become a lot easier.
Final then is, call it, we've got 2 semi-finals coming this weekend. Friday night here in Paris, of course, Saturday night here in Paris in New Zealand time. That's Saturday morning, and then the Sunday morning. Call us in both semi-finals.
All Blacks comfortable against Argentina. I think the South Africa-England game will be closer, but I think South Africa take that.
My man, so generous with your time. Thank you so much, dude.
Pleasure. Absolutely loved it. Thank you very much.
Devlin.
Is it past to COVID? I met me missus.
The Platform.